Okay, so in the first video from Jurgen Handke, he explained about sense relations in genera and defined the main sense relations from synonymy to meronymy. He said some linguists refer sense as lexical semantics, so let's just go to the point of the video. The logician Gottlob Frege was the first to distinguish two dimensions of our semantic knowledge of an expression, its sense and its reference. A number of linguists have equated sense with sense relations by defining the sense of a linguistic expression as the set of sense relations that hold between it and other expressions of the same language. These sense relations are central to the way speakers construct meaning. There is disagreement among linguists about the number of sense relationships at the level of words. The most common of few defines three sense relations, so they are synonymy, antonymy, and hyponymy. Some linguists include a fourth relationship, namely meronymy, while others, and that is a more extended view, prefer hyponomy is one relationship which includes the meronymy and incompatibility as a second semantics or sense relationship. Okay, so let's talk about these sense relations in detail, and let's start with synonymy. Synonymy is traditionally defined as sameness of meaning. It can, however, be maintained that no two words or lexemes have exactly the same meaning. It would seem unlikely that two such elements would survive in a language, according to which possible synonyms can differ. There are at least 5 dimensions. There are dialectical differences, as you can see the example from the picture, autumn and fall. They both have the same semantic core, yet they used in different varieties or dialects of English. Next, there are stylistic differences, as you can see the example from the picture, gentleman and chap. They have the same semantic core, however, the use depends on stylistic aspects. Next, statesman and politician involve the difference referred to as emotive difference. They also have the same semantic core, but their emotive extensions are different. Some lexemes require specific context or collocations. They are collocational restricted. As for the example, rancid butter and adult eggs. And then last one, there is semantic overlap such as the two adjectives ripe and mature. So with these differences in mind, synonymy can be best defined as relatedness in meaning, and that is two words or lexemes have identical semantic cores but different extensions. Intuitively, some pairs of synonyms are more synonymous than others. Thus, 3 degrees of synonymy are often distinguished. They are absolute synonymy, partial synonymy, or such as overlap, and near synonymy. Okay, let's move on to the second relationship, antonymy. The term antonymy is used for oppositeness of meaning. In contrast to synonymy, antonymy is a very regular feature of natural language and can be defined fairly precisely. Look at the picture. There are antonym pairs such as hot and cold or pass and fail. Since there are many ways in which lexical items can stand in opposition to each other, some linguists reject the term antonymy and suggest the term incompatibility instead. According to this view, synonymy would be defined as a converse relationship of incompatibility. There are several ways in which lexical items can stand in opposition to each other. One possibility is referred to as gradable antonymy. This is the relationship between opposites where the positive of one term doesn't necessarily imply the negative of the other. In other words, the opposition is a matter of degree rather than absolute. This type of opposition is usually associated with adjectives such as white, old, hot, and etc. Look at the example, such as a scale. There are antonyms hot and cold, but between them there are several possibilities. Cold, for example, is a very low temperature. Cool is a bit higher. Tepid is somewhere in the middle. Warm is even higher, and hot is highest of these terms. The items are implicitly comparative terms, and their definition varies according to the referent and according to the norm against which the referent is being assessed. For example, look at the term hot in hot bath versus hot drink. Okay, second type of antonymy is referred to as non-gradable. This type of antonymy differs from gradable antonymy in that the opposition is absolute. There are just two incompatible terms in the set. One is the opposite of the other. Each of the following pairs exhibits this relationship. For example, dead and alive, or male and female, or past and fail. However, as you all know, speakers can always alter these two terms classifications to create special effects. Next, incompatibility is another type of antonymy, can be taught as a relationship of exclusion. Incompatible are terms which denote categories which share no members. If something is a dog, then it is not a cat or a mouse or an elephant. Sentences which incompatible terms with us contradict each other. A well-known example is the set of color term. For example, the meaning of blue is incompatible with the meaning of red as well as the meaning of the other color terms. It should be noted, though, that incompatibility does not necessarily imply opposite of meaning. The fourth type of antonymy is referred to as relational. Relational antonyms differ from gradable antonyms in that they are not susceptible to degrees of opposition and from binary antonyms because they are not either in all character. In fact, their opposition involves movement or orientation in opposite directions. For this reason, they also call directional opposites. There are two subtypes of relational antonyms. There are something referred to as reversive, that is normally a relation between verbs describing movement or more generally change in opposite directions. Then the other subtype is converse terms which describe a relation between two entities from alternative viewpoints. An interesting concept related to antonymy is referred to as the concept of markedness. The members of antonym pairs are often distinguished with respect of their markedness, where one of the items, the marked term, is that they possess a special mark which the other does not have. There are three major types of markedness. For example, morphological markedness, where one item in a pair of opposites carries a morphological mark that the other lacks. This mark is typically a negative prefix. Look at the example from the picture. To create the marked terms, you can just add some negative prefix like un in unhappy, im in impossible, and this in disregard. The second type of markedness is distributional markedness. Instead of gradable antonyms such as long and short, high and low, the unmarked term is the item that can be used in a wider variety of contexts. The last type is semantic markedness. It is a distinction that applies to pairs of opposites in contexts where the normal opposition between the two terms is neutralized or non-operational. In such contexts, the unmarked term is the one that is used for both items and its meaning is what is common to the two terms of the opposition. Now, let's move on to hyponymy. Hyponymy is a hierarchical sense relationship between lexical items based on the notion of inclusion. A less general term includes the meaning of a more general term. The less general term is called the hyponym. Look at the picture. Ant, fly, and bee are hyponyms to insect, and fruit fly, blue fly, and brown fly are hyponyms to fly. The more general term is known as the superordinate term or the hyperonym. So it means the insect is the hyperonym to fly, ant, and bee, and the fly is the hyperonym to fruit fly, blue fly, and brown fly. This set of hyponyms which have the same hyponyms are referred to as co-hyponyms, whereas their vertical relationship with a hyperonym is one of inclusion. So fly includes insect, bee includes insect, and ant includes insect. Their horizontal relationship is one of incompatibility, so blue fly is incompatible with brown fly and ant is incompatible with bee. Hyponymy can be defined as a transitive relationship. For example, look at the picture. If A is a hyponym of B and B is a hyponym of C, then necessarily A is also a hyponym of C. Last, similar to hyponymy, Meronymy is a sense relation based on the notion of inclusion. This is why some linguists subsume it under the heading of hyponymy. Meronymy describes a part-whole relationship between lexical items. For example, mouth is the part of the face and so is nose. So nose and mouth can be regarded as meronyms of face, where face itself is the holonym. There are at least two kinds of meronymy. There are functional meronymy, where the part of detachable form the whole, and continuous meronymy, where the part and whole constitute an inseparable or continuous whole. Well, meronymy is similar to hyponymy in that it reflects a hierarchical relationship between lexical items. However, meronymy is not inclusion as a whole but in terms of part-whole relationship. Okay, so let's move on to the second video. In the second video, Dr. Nimer Abusalim also explained about sense relations, but the main focus is at homonymy and polysemy. A word may have multiple sense and a sense may also have multiple words. For example, the word bank can be the site of river or manifold. In this case, a word may have multiple senses. Another example is the word dad and father may have the same exact sense in our mind. In this case, a sense may also have multiple words. Nimer divided up the main sense relations into four main categories. First is homonymy and polysemy. Second is semantic similarity or synonymy. Third is semantic opposition. Last is taxonomic or hierarchical relations. Now let's talk about homonymy and polysemy. The major difference between the two is that in homonymy the sense are unrelated, but in polysemy the sense are related. What is related in homonymy could be either the sound or the orthography. So if there are two words that unrelated in senses but sound exactly the same, it is homophony. Then if there are two senses that are unrelated but look exactly the same, it is homograph. Let's say that if there is two words with unrelated senses that sound the same and they are spelled exactly the same, it is called pure homonymy. For example, the word bank, like the example before, which is the sound and the spelling is exactly the same but in different sense or meaning. Now, let's move on to polysemy. Senses in polysemy are related. For example, the word magazine has two senses. They are something you can read and cartridge to store bullets for gun. To know whether those two senses related to each other or not, we can take a look at the etymology of the word. Magazine comes from the Arabic word makhazin or makhzan, means to store, to save, or to storage. Then the relation between those two senses are for the magazine that you read. The essential idea of the meaning was that you are storing information into one book, and for the second sense meaning was storing bullets. In this case, now we have two related senses storing.